It's time for another Football Manager tier list. We've done wingers, we've done forwards, and now we're moving on to midfielders. We'll be focusing on some of the best Wonderkids from the FMSCOUT site, from the central midfielder position and also defensive midfield, and we'll be ranking them in 5 different categories. GOAT, which is reserved for 1, the best midfielder in my opinion, best of the rest for the others that are very close to GOAT but don't quite make it, good for the good Wonderkids, okay for the okay Wonderkids, and then could be better for the ones that maybe aren't the best and it's better to go buy someone else. Now, as mentioned then, all of it is my own opinion and I want to hear yours in the comments down below. You guys tend to love these videos or hate them also in terms of my opinions on some things, so let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Now, just to note, there are no attacking midfielder centres in this video. We're going to do that in a separate one, so don't worry if your favourite player is missing. And like I say, I've gone for 20 combined of some of the best potential players from the midfield positions, defensive midfield and central from the FMSCOUT site, but also I've picked 5 wildcard players in there as well that don't quite make the top 20 but I know are often quite used by a lot of you guys. The only final thing to note is often in these videos I get complaints where I'll put, say, Jude Bellingham in the could be better section because he's just too expensive for anyone, and you guys tend to hate that, so I'm going to change it today. I am still going to take price into account, but I won't purely put a player in a certain section because of his price. We'll consider everything from availability, starting ability, potential, price, all of that will be considered in a player's judgment. So I'm not just going to shove all of the expensive players in one section. Now that we've done that though, I can catch my breath and we're going to go through these one by one. I have not made my mind up about any of these yet. I haven't even had a practice go. We're going to do this as we go, and we start with a very, very talented player, and that is Pedri. Now, Pedri is obviously a brilliant midfielder, already a very important player for Barcelona, and whilst if you are a mega club you might be able to sign him, I think for most teams he's widely unavailable. He's also quite pricey, but of course he has great ability, and I'm sure if he was £2 million he'd obviously be the GOAT or in best of the rest, but he's not. He's a very expensive option that only the best teams can buy, so I think he sits pretty nicely in the good section. I don't think he's going to make it into the best Wonderkids of this year in midfield despite his potential, and that might happen for a few players. Next is Harvey Elliott, who might fall into a similar category for a lot of these reasons, everything from price to availability, but I just don't think he's as good as some of the other players in this list, especially when you look at his price point being £100 million or so from Liverpool. I feel like you could spend that money a lot better, so for me, he's just okay. He's an okay Wonderkid. I don't think he's world class. And now we get on to the ones that are a bit of fun, the ones that aren't as well known just yet in terms of world football, and that is Dinamo Zagreb's Martin Baturina, who a lot of people would consider as an attacking midfielder, but he is a central midfielder naturally in game, and that's where he is on the FMSCOUT Wonderkid list. I think he's a fantastic player in game for a bunch of reasons. I absolutely love his starting attributes, his potential, and his price point is usually about 8 to 10 million. Obviously playing for Zagreb, they're a big team, but they're not the kind of team that could really hold on to a player if any, say, Premier League side came in for him or any side in the top 5 European leagues. So for that reason, I think he is one of my favourites, and it's a very early entry into best of the rest. I might change this later on, but for now, I'm going to keep it here. If I've done this video right, you should be seeing a screenshot of all of these players, so hopefully that way you can check these players out if you haven't seen them yet in game. But my next player is Lucas Guanaduaf. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but he plays for Salzburg. He's a French midfielder who's very highly wanted in real life football, and in FM he can sometimes be really good, but most of the time I just think he falls a little bit flat. Now, he does play for Salzburg straight away, which gives him a bit of boost in his development. He's not someone that's stuck in the academy for years, but I'm just not a huge fan of him, and for that reason I'm only going to put him in the okay section. A lot of you might love him. In my experience, he never tends to really blow me away, and I don't think he's the best player in this list. Next, we have João Veloso of Benfica, a very good forward-thinking midfielder that you can sign from Benfica for only a couple of million. I haven't used him myself too many times personally, but we have looked at him in the past. I even think we might have done a Wonderkid to Superstar in FM23 on him. A cheap bargain player that's got good ability, good potential, and is available for a lot of sides. I think he fits in the good section. Now, this is interesting because usually I don't have so many people high up very early on, but I think we're just getting a lot of good ones straight away because Asan Udrego is my next player. The German from Schalke is a phenomenal midfielder who's great in so many areas, isn't too expensive, and often Schalke are forced to sell sell because of their financial difficulties. I think he is one of, if not the best Wonderkids in the midfield position in the game this year, and I think he's definitely going to be in contention for that GOAT position a little bit later. So I think for me now, Asan Udrago is going to go in best of the rest. He's one of my favourites, and he's followed up by maybe an equal level player to him, who is Sverre Halsef Naipan of Rosenborg out in Norway. This guy is one of the breakout stars of this year. 16, I think he is at the start of your saves. Very cheap, great ability right from the off, and huge potential. Can play for most of the big clubs in the world. Even if you sign him for Real Madrid, I think you'd get phenomenal results out of this kid. He has got such a bright future in game, and I think in real life there's a bit of talk around him too, so maybe it won't be too long until he's like a household name everywhere, and for that reason I'm going to put him in the best of the rest category. We've got 3 in there already, which means we might have to drag someone out later. Next we move on to Warren Zaire-Emery, who has some of the highest potential out of anybody in this list, but he is a PSG player. He is a regular for the first team already pretty much, and for that reason he comes very pricey. I do actually think he's got better attributes than Harvey Elliott, and maybe even as a player could compete with Pedri once he's developed, but as mentioned, I feel like it's very hard to put any of these multi-million pound players playing for some of the biggest clubs in the world into the best positions, because most people can't really sign them, and I have to think about that when choosing my favourite Wonderkid. Up next we have Gabriel Moscardo, who has moved to PSG in real life, I feel like, or at least was very close to. I'm recording this before the January transfer update, so by the time it comes out some of these players might have moved clubs, but right now Gabriel Moscardo is playing in the Brazilian divisions. He does have high potential, and for that reason he does feature in this list, but he just isn't one of my favourites. I don't think he's so bad that he needs to be and could be better. I think he just sits in that okay section. You'd have to pay about 10 to 15 million for him, but he might get a big boost in the winter update if he did get that move to PSG. I'm pretty sure we'll see a bit of an increase. Up next, we've got Marc Bernal, who for me is straight away in that good section. Pretty fairly priced, is basically the next Busquets in game if you develop him well. When I did a Barcelona rebuild, he really took off and came out of nowhere. I don't quite think he's good enough to be in best of the rest for me, but I just think he's in a good section. A very solid option, and Barca have definitely got one for the future here. Moving on, we'll try and move through these quite quickly because there is so many players. We've got Gavi next, who I think is probably going to sit in the same section with Pedri and Zaire-Emery, all for the same reasons. Very talented player, quite pricey. Sometimes he's available a few seasons into your save, but that's obviously quite dependent on what happens in his career. I just think a good option, but again, you're not going to be able to sign him for your mid-table Premier League team. The same applies for Camavinga. I could go on and talk about these players all day, but you get the idea. And you know what? I'm just going to do Jude Bellingham at the same time. He might even have a case to be in best of the rest, even with his price point. But we have to consider all factors when making this list, so for that reason Bellingham can just go in the good section alongside Gavi, Pedri, Zaire-Emery, all of which I'm sure will be some of the superstars of world football in the future. Up next we've got Carlos Baleba of Brighton, who was signed almost as a Moises Caicedo replacement. In FM, decent player, but sometimes I've seen him let go on a free contract by Brighton. Doesn't seem to ever become a real star, and I don't think he's ever actually someone that I thought, you know what, I need to sign him as soon as possible. It just never seems to me that he really works out, so I'm just going to put him in the okay section. A fine player, but just not one that really blows me away. Next we've got Alex Scott of Bournemouth, formerly of Bristol City. Huge potential last year, one of the best midfielders. I can't remember if he was my GOAT from FM23, but he certainly would have been up there. He was probably the most well-known name that came out of the game last year, and I think he is, again, very talented. Great potential, but he has made that big move to Bournemouth. The odd time I have signed him, I've had to pay a lot of money for him. I think I'm going to put him in the good section. I feel like he belongs there. For a lot of reasons, I don't think he quite makes the best of the rest or the GOAT anymore, but still a very good player. And of course, with all of these, even the players I put in could be better. They're all considered Wonderkids in game, or at least have the potential to be so. So it doesn't necessarily mean you can't get anything good out of these players. I just think there's better options when you're weighing them up compared to each other. Next, we have Fatih Kanti, who is a former Roma player, now playing for a different side in Italy, if I remember correct. I had a look at him before this video, and you know what? The first one in could be better. I just don't think he's a very good player at all. Maybe it's a bit version dependent, and sometimes when he develops he can look really good and sometimes not so much, but for me, there's just better options out there. I wouldn't go for him personally, even though he is a little bit cheaper than some of the others in this list. So for me, he's in that could be better section. And I'm actually going to put someone else with him very early on here. Stefan Bajcetic, or Bajcetic, I don't know how you pronounce it. He's a Liverpool player, Spaniard, who got his break in the first team, I think last season or the season before, and looked pretty comfortable there. Got an injury, and in FM, he never gets a chance at Liverpool. He'll never develop unless he moves away, at which point he's a few years later in his career. And if you look at him right away. I just don't really think he's the kind of player that I'd ever really go for. Some of you might really like him, but he's just not for me. He's also natural at centre-back. Is he really a great centre-back? I'm not too sure. He can play defensive midfield too, but I just remember when I was looking through the list before this video, he was one that I saw and I thought, you know what? He's going to be in the could be better section. He isn't for me personally, but maybe he is for you. Next we have Pape Matar, who is a £100 million player playing for Tottenham in game. He's classed as a Wonderkid straight away, and he is fine. But I think that's about as far as it goes. He can be a really good player for Spurs, but again, he's going to cost a lot, playing for one of the bigger sides in the Premier League as well, on pretty big wages. If you did choose somehow to spend 100 million on him, I think you'd be better off to spend 100 million on Bellingham, Alex Scott, Pedri, Gavi, Zaire-Emery, whoever it is. I feel like they're all better options than him, so he can just go in the OK section. And that's also where I'm going to put the next player, and that is Javi Guerra, who plays for Valencia. He's been linked with a move to Newcastle in real life in recent times and is valued in game at about 60 million. He's got some good attributes right from the off, very well rounded, but is pretty pricey for the player you're getting. And when we speak about some of the others later, particularly some of those in best of the rest, how does he compare to say an Udrago or a Naipan? I actually think it's not that big of a difference, and these guys are a lot cheaper, and they're a hell of a lot younger too, 17 and 16 I want to say. Javi Guerra here is 20 years of age, so for that reason, he is just okay. Next we have Adam Wharton, who I know has moved from Blackburn to Crystal Palace, so when you load up your save after the winter update, he will have moved clubs. He's one for me that doesn't quite blow me away. I did a Blackburn rebuild once, and he did turn into a very good player, but outside of that, I just don't really think he's ever going to play for a top team in most of your saves. Maybe I'm wrong, but for me, goes into OK section. Desiree Doué is next off Stade Rennes, and we're getting quite close now to our last few players. He is going right into the good section. He's more of a forward-thinking midfielder, again another one that some of you might class as an attacking midfielder. He can usually be picked up for about 15 million and has some very good attributes for that price point, but compared to some of the others, I don't think he quite makes it. But for me, he would be on the higher side of the good section if this was in any kind of order. And now we're getting close to the end, and the competition is starting to heat up a little bit. We've got Archie Gray, Romeo Lavia, Arthur Vermeeren, and João Neves. We're going to do Lavia first. He's one that I'm just going to put in the OK section, and maybe even could be better. I think he just cracks the OK section. Chelsea player, obviously they've got lots of good young players. He just doesn't blow me away straight away, and being at Chelsea, he's quite hard to get a hold of. If you were going to pay the 50 million plus that Chelsea would want for him, you may as well be spending that on some of these other players. So for me, he can go in the OK section. Arthur Vermeeren is one that might upset some people. Antwerp player, has moved now in real life. Considered a really talented player at the age of 18, a future Belgian international, might even have played for Belgium by now, I don't know personally, but in game, could be better. I don't think he's very good attribute wise. Let me know what you think, but just looking at him before I started making this video, I thought, you know what, there's so many better options in this list. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh on more of a defensive minded midfielders, but I've got to stick with my guns here of what I think. And next we have two players that I really do like, Archie Gray and João Neves. Now Archie Gray, I think it would be harsh to put him in the good section. I think he could even be a best of the rest contender. Oh, this is tough. I don't feel like we can have too many in best of the rest. So for that reason, I'm going to be controversial. I'm going to put Archie Gray in best of the rest. I'm going to drop Baturina down to good, but consider him as the best of all of the good ones. I think Archie Gray just goes above him. Leeds player, usually can be signed for just under £20 million or so. Pretty much a guaranteed England international in your save. He will be very versatile come the winter update, I'm sure. He's been playing defence for Leeds, but can also play central midfield. One of the good things about him in-game is he starts off with some great attributes that mean Leeds will play him, and sometimes you get stuck with Wonderkids where their host clubs won't ever use them, and the player doesn't develop because of that. But Archie Gray is good enough to play for Leeds, and in most of your saves will do. He'll develop quick, and if you don't get in there fast enough, he's going to cost you an absolute bomb. And then we have João Neves, one of the breakout stars of this year's game, came into Benfica's team to pretty much replace Enzo Fernandez. He's made it look like Enzo Fernandez was never there, to be honest. He's been fantastic for them, a great player in both boxes, both defensively and going forward, creative, sound on the ball, brilliant in-game in terms of his attributes, not the priciest in the world, still pricey at about 40 million, but you are getting an elite player that could play straight away for your Man Cities, your Man U's, your Real Madrids. He could walk straight in to those kind of teams with his level, and it's no surprise teams like Manchester United in real life are interested in João Neves. For that reason, he makes it into the best of the rest, and now I have to pick my favourite from this list. I don't quite think it would be Archie Gray. I think he's probably the worst in the best of the rest category. I do love Hassan Udrago, I just think he's going to fall below Neves and Naipan, which gives me a choice now between Neves and Naipan for the win, purely because of how good of a player he can look at full growth, the potential he's had, his price point at Rosenborg, and his availability. For me, I think he has to pip it. I think Naipan is going to take the GOAT position. Let me know if you disagree in the comments down below. It'd be interesting to hear your calls on these players. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed, smash the like button, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.